Okay, so hi and welcome to this webinar, which is based around Ponyland. We have all our members here, and they're basically going to talk us through what it's like to be a band and what it's like to make a band, and all those lovely secrets that you wish you knew. They're going to tell us.
Nice.
So we've got Geordie, who is guitar, Frankie, who is on the vocals, then we've got Mark, who is drummer number one, and Joe, drummer number two, and then we've got Faye, who is saxophone, and John on the bass. And we also have Jeff Bartholomew, who plays trumpet, but he couldn't be with us today. But when you go and listen to your music, you'll be hearing him trumpeting away. So let's start with our first question if everyone's ready.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Can you tell us a bit about the band and how it got started?
Yeah. So me and Frankie lived in a commune called Ponyland in Australia, and I was kind of hired as chief carpenter, and I've got no carpentry skills at all. And I was building a kitchen, helping building his kitchen for this guy. And yeah, so we were there, and I was listening to some amazing music on this commune with loads of artists and activists, and it was called Ponyland, and it just inspired me to write really creative and just do stuff that I want to do, basically. Um, yeah, it just triggered me into doing that, basically. Yeah, it was good.
Wow, that's cool. I've
Yeah,
always wondered where the name came from, actually.
yeah,
So I'm glad I
that's
now
it.
know.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And then so we finally came back to Cumbria, and I was invited to be in a band with Jeff Bartholomew, the trumpet player, which was great because it's always tricky when you come back from some, I don't know, being away for a while to get back into the music scene. And he was just like, "Oh yeah, so should we have a jam? Yes. Let's play some music. Let's play some of your music. Oh yeah, I'll do it." And he was like, he didn't wince basically when I started playing some of my music. So yeah, he was actually quite polite about it as well. So
Cool.
yeah,
Well,
it's
we're gonna listen to one of your a short clip. Unfortunately, it's quite short. Of your song Thylacine. Thylacine.
correct.
Nice.
Yes, nice.
Yeah. So we'll listen to that now. Cool. I'm loving all the pucker teas and turmeric coming up during the song. Do
Yeah.
you want to give us a bit of information about that? Like, particularly what the name means, because I didn't know.
What the Thylacine? Okay, so it's an extinct. I thought you meant turmeric. I was like, don't know much about turmeric, but apparently it's good in tea.
The colour of our
Uh,
wall.
yeah. Okay, so Thylacine is an extinct. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's a marsupial uh, that it was in New Zealand, and it's been extinct for about 80 years now. So it's quite unusual animal. It has the back end of a zebra and the front end of a dog.
I've seen one of those, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You see, yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So, how did all the band members come together?
Okay, so it's been through quite a few changes. Um, Initially, it was just to get things going. Like me and Jeff and Frankie lived really close together, and we just wanted to get musicians, that local musicians from Penrith, or Carlisle, or in Cumbria, and we did that, and we recorded an EP, and it kind of just evolved from that, essentially. And I've got a few mates and some of my favorite musicians here, and it's evolved into this now. It's great. I've got some of my favorite players, and
Cool.
yeah, they're awesome. Some of my favorites. So yeah.
So how do you go about getting people involved? I'm sure there's a few people who would like to know how you approach a musician to get them into your band.
I think everything that I've done is been based around being mates with people and just asking friends favors for stuff, and yeah, just word of mouth as well. Like, yeah, I've just asked people, and a lot of the time everyone's just been on board, which has been, I've just been really lucky. Everyone's just been straight away, let's go for it. Yeah, let's give it a go. And we don't necessarily know what we're doing like straight away, but just like jump in head first, throw ourselves at the audience, and that's it.
And what about so all your wonderful band members are all sort of
Yeah,
like nicely sitting very politely.
they are very, very muted.
What about you guys? Because obviously for lots of musicians, you're in lots of different bands. What do you look for when somebody approaches you to be in a band? Yeah, off you go, Mark.
So I'm probably the most recent Ponyland member to have joined, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. And essentially the way that I was approached by Geordie was through another of the drummers. So there's quite a handful of drummers. Joe and I aren't the only drummers in the group. There's like a pool, and just depending on availability and whatever the gig is, certain drummers will be doing the gig. And another of the drummers, called Dave McKeague, just gave Geordie my name and says, this guy can play a bit of drums, maybe ask him to do a gig. And the reason I said yes is because I saw the band and I saw they had 2 drummers for a start. I mean, that's cool. And it's just such high energy, such like kind of hypnotic music, and you just really get into the flow of it when it's live. You just, I feel like you can't say no to a Ponyland gig if you're offered it, you know. And to be part of the community as well. It's just,
But
it's
it's
great.
not a cult though.
So,
Well,
Faye, what about you?
Well, I think Geordie just messaged me pretty much like he was saying, but I knew John first, and then because me and John playing a couple of things together as well, and then yeah, it was sort of like there was a bit of a pool of horn players for a while, I think, and then it sort of narrowed down more. But then I would just sort of like do different gigs with Ponyland, and then the more we did gigs together, the more it was like I just ended up learning the music. And then I just remembered the other day that I used to not know the music. I used to like have to read it off a music stand, and that feels mad now because I feel really like in the band. But I forgot that at first there was like several months of me being like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing in this bit, or I don't know what. Whereas now I'm completely certain. But yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, when someone asks me about being in a band, I sort of just like a bit like Mark was saying, like think about the kind of music it is. Like, will I enjoy it? Because I think if you enjoy playing the music, then you'll do a good job, and if you get on with the people as well, then it'll be I think you just need those 2 things really to really take you somewhere musically, at least.
Yeah.
I think certainly having people that you know and that you like and that you have experience working with is a big part of it. But also, like Jodie said, just being friends with people, being friends with musicians, and making sure that you're surrounded by people who are interested in making music is half the thing. Because I mean, I knew Jodie years ago. We were in a band before you originally moved away, based in Newcastle here. That was a bit more of a kind of modern jazz band. that also Dave McKee, one of the other drummers, played in. And then we didn't play together for years. When you went away, I went down a different kind of path in the music that I was doing. And then when you moved back, I came and saw Ponyland a few times with whichever bass player was playing with you then, because it's a real, every seat in the band for some while has been like a rotating cast, and just gradually it's morphed into this fairly solid, stable unit, which is kind of really made it super special. But again, like, I knew Jodie through that. I know Faye through playing in a band that we're in together, a couple of bands like that we're in together, like you said, and that's really all it is. You know, if you're around people and you're interested in making music and they're interested in making music, and you connect on a level of sort of friendship and mutual excitement, then I don't think you can go wrong, especially with something this exciting, you know, this creative.
Yeah. I definitely think, like you're saying, it's about the people you're with. It's a lot of the time it comes through a friendship, doesn't it? What would you say, like, you know, there are obviously some musicians out there who are maybe a bit more isolated. Maybe they don't have like a pool of people within their friendship group who are either playing music that they want to play, or like, what advice would you give for somebody who was looking? Yeah, Joe?
All right. Yeah, I joined the band through Georgie coming to the pub, but it was like a big regret of mine that they asked me a long time before I joined to join, and for some reason I didn't. Must have been like near the beginning-ish. But yeah, I think I'm not in Newcastle, so there's not as many musicians around as in Penrith. There's BlueJam, which is great, but yeah, just didn't really meet that many people. But yeah, I don't know. Took me a while to find people, and then when I did join, I just kind of threw myself in. But even though I felt it was a bit intimidating.
Can I just say,
isn't it though? Yeah.
Can I just say, if you don't know people, you don't really know them, like you've never spoken to them before, and they're musicians and you're quite keen to try and get them on board, just find a way to get in touch with them. Maybe they'll be into your music, and send them recordings of you rehearsing your music, or if you write music, send them some sheet music, or just make it happen. Like, just get in touch with people, and you never know, that you might gel. You might just invite them round to hang out and jam, and you might just hit it off.
But also, I think like using social media is really helpful. Like, you could just message somebody on Instagram and they don't have to reply. Like, and I don't think I would have done that in the past because it feels a bit like invasive somehow. But I think nowadays people do see social media as a bit more of a like work tool as well, and like a way to collaborate. And especially right now, like a lot of musicians, I think, are a lot more open to collaborating and doing stuff. And like recently a couple of people have just messaged me on Instagram, and I've never met them before. And in fact, somebody messaged me from like Austria, and I was like, oh God, do we know each other? And like, I couldn't do it anyway. And it was just a really chilled out, like, oh, I'm just doing this and you play saxophone. Like, it's not like, it was very, and he was just like, oh yeah, I've got other people that I can ask and it's fine. But it's like, all they've done is just like send me bits of their music and be like, this is it. If you like it, we can do something. If not, that's fine. And I think like it's, if anything, it's just like keeping your finger on the pulse a bit with like which musicians are doing what, like locally, or even like right now, I guess it doesn't really matter where they are, which is exciting again. But yeah, just sort of hearing what you like and then approaching them, and sort of, I guess sometimes you can get a feel for if someone might be open in that way to chatting as well. And but I guess you never can tell really, so it's always just worth saying hi, and if nothing else, you've said hello and that you like their music, and that's always a nice thing to hear.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a bit like not hunting, but you know, keeping your eye out for those people. Like, you go and see a band, like a local band, and you actually just approach them afterwards and see what they're doing, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But also messaging them before the gig. It's actually exactly what I did to Dave McKee. is I heard there was a Ponyland gig at the Cluny in Newcastle, and I messaged them before the gig, not knowing them very well, and just said, "Oh, I know about you. I've heard a bit about your drumming and stuff. I've heard you're doing a gig on Saturday. I'm going to come along." And then because he was aware of who I was before the gig, that when I approach him after the gig, it's not so much like, who's this guy approaching me to say hello? It's like, "Oh, you're the guy that messaged me earlier. Hello, how you doing?" And that kind of sets you off on a good foot for the conversation.
Ah, cool. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I think it's one of those things to have a bit of forethought as well. If you've got that plan that you want to be in a band or to create a band, it's like to really go out and sit and search for it, not just maybe wait for it to come to you. What about when you're like making music? That's the biggest part of being in a band, isn't it? That creation of music. How does that process work between you all? Is it collaboration?
So
do you want to go, Mark?
you go ahead first if you like.
Okay. Well, initially it's written, well, I had the initial idea and I always make it really simple. It's always really simple and might have a specific groove in my head. And then you just present it either on sheet music, or you might have a few like recordings of it, and you just present it to your musicians, and then they'll do with it what they will. And it's obviously, it's going to be, if I can write drums, I can write for drums, but obviously Mark or Joe will know how to do something better than me, because I'm not, they've spent hours and hours doing it. So I try and don't overthink it too much, and present some simple ideas, and then it can go from there, I think.
Yeah, so a lot of it, Jody basically comes up with the structures, like he says, and such. And to be honest, I've only had experience of like one of the tunes being written, but this is what I experienced with it. We had a gig coming up pretty soon. We got in a rehearsal room, played through the track a couple of times, but then when this tune actually got written, or I say written, but when it really came to life was when we were performing it. So we have this relatively new tune that we just played on tour, and when we played it live sounded completely different to how we actually practiced it in the rehearsal room. And it was like that. Doing the gigs is kind of like the process of figuring out what works within the music, and yeah, what parts fit well, what don't, and then they kind of write themselves from there, just from gigging them.
Yeah, so like, would you say your songs, wow, they sort of like transform through your gigs? So like
yeah,
the
I
first
think
gig will be completely different to like the end of the tour or something.
I think the initial song is normally pretty rubbish. It takes like 3 gigs at least until it starts becoming its separate sound world, or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call it. But
Well,
yeah,
I feel like as well, Geordie, like you leave quite a lot of space in them for people to do their own thing with. So it's like, that's one of the things I love actually about your songwriting, is that you have like, you write stuff that's like quite specific, but then it's somehow like specific but also free. So like you're like, this is how it goes, but then you really want everybody to do their own thing with it. So I think that's like, I guess that's how we collaborate really, is that you bring stuff in and then you're like, now this is the vague sound of it, but I want you to do like play it in your way.
it's like confusing everyone to say that I'm not controlling, but it's like super controlling. No, I'm not really controlling. No, yeah, I think.
Did I say that right? No, I'm joking.
No,
I was just making a controlling joke. No, but did I get the message right there? No, but really though, I just think like you're just really good at writing stuff that makes people collaborate really well the way it's written. So because there's so much like openness in it, but then it's also like not vague. Like, sometimes when things are so vague that you don't know what to do with it, but like with your stuff it's like, this is how it goes, but then like
Oh, I think you've frozen a little bit. I think we might have
frozen.
missed the bit you said. Okay, well, hopefully you'll come back to us in a minute.
Yeah, it's going to be something really profound, I think.
Yeah, I know. Oh well. Dot,
Possibly.
Oh, well.
I think
Way too
I
much.
think there's something in this as well, though, that about the playing out live question, which I think when we're talking about making music together as a band, which I think is really interesting. About having been in Ponyland for quite a while now, I wasn't the very first bass player, but I think I was in it fairly early. And when I joined the band originally, it sounded quite different from how it sounds now. It was a little bit more kind of, you know, the Afrobeat elements were a lot more forefront. Some of the direct kind of more stylized types of music were kind of happening a bit more, and the kind of Ponyland sound was happening a little bit over here and a little bit over here and a little bit over here, and then gradually it's become something that's really kind of happened. And I think part of that is like you say, us finding a way to work with the material that has us in it as well as like this band sound. But then also, Geordie, I think it's interesting that you went from sort of putting a few things out that might have pushed it in one direction or another, and then letting the thing that it really wants to be reveal itself, which I think is a really interesting sort of process for all bands to go through, regardless of what you're making. Like, the first thing you make is always going to be, you know, you might nail it straight out the gate, but I think it's more likely that you'll get pretty close and kind of think, okay, well, I like these things, I don't like these things. Let me keep this. Let me look at that in a different way, or jettison that if I don't need it. And through that slow process of figuring out what you like as a composer and then what fits the sort of sound that you're working in, I think that's a really interesting process to have watched, having been in the band, and also to have been like part of too. Is like it's just really fun, and it's gone from being something, you know, I think there was a little bit of self-conscious kind of grooviness that then got replaced with this kind of punk energy, which was always there, but a little bit like, all right, now we're going to do the punk thing, and then we're going to go do the groovy thing. But now it's just much more like, it's much more mashed together and itself now, in a way, which is really cool.
Cool. Yeah. I guess it's a bit like you know, it's always an experiment. You know, never assume that your finished product is what you're about to go and play, because otherwise it'll just become a bit stale, I guess, you know. What about when you're like, tell us about gigging. What was your first ever gig that you had?
So I was really hoping Jeff would be here to answer this, because it was great. It was like, I think the first 4 gigs that we played was in the Source Cafe in Carlisle, and it was pretty much a DIY sort of book, get the bands in. Actually, Sam Johnson helped us get the gig, the first gig. No, the second gig. The first gig, I put it on myself. I was looking at about probably 10 people coming through the door. But somehow, I think there was about 12 people. So it was pretty good. And no, there's a few more. And yeah, it went pretty well. Obviously, it was, I think the first gig's a strange ones. You should never be put off by your first gig. And yeah, you're just trying to figure each other out, and you're trying to read the audience, and you're trying to just get through it. I think the first gig, you're just trying to get through it. And but it was really enjoyable, and then it slowly started becoming something else, I suppose. But yeah, the places, like, if you've got any venues locally that are open to putting on nights yourself, get in touch with them, and invite all your mates, and hopefully a few people come and just get playing. Like, that was what we did it for. We just wanted to have fun, and it was such a nice, like, community spot, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Source Cafe.
So, like, with gigs, it's one of those things. I think people get really nervous about approaching a venue, because they don't really know what they should be saying, what they should be offering. Can you give any advice on, like, you know, what you should be going forward with, like whether you should be expecting to get a fee from your gig, or, you know, what is it that you what you need to get from it in order to make it work, and what do you feel like is a good way of approaching a venue?
Yeah, it's difficult because it changes so much, like depending on the situation. So, George, you've always been really quite firm on all the musicians must get paid. So we've turned down a lot of gigs where there just wouldn't be any fee at all, unless for very sort of specific things like causes we believe in. Then we've done free gigs for some sort of climate activism sort of fundraisers. But in general, we've always been quite firm that we have to make something. I suppose it depends on where it is and what it is. Like some really quirky venues that we've wanted to play at, like in Leeds and stuff, they can't afford to pay anything. So then for things like that, we've kind of kept certain venues and certain promoters on the back burner for when we then go and organize a tour, so that you can try and get maybe a few dates together where you might be able to have a quite low paying gig alongside some better paying ones to kind of even it out a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
And like, what actually about touring? Like, how much touring have you done as a band?
We did one just before lockdown. Thank God we got to do it.
we just slipped in there just before lockdown. Yeah, it was probably just as the virus was rife, and it felt like we were probably spreading it around, but we had no idea. No, it wasn't different. It was like, it was in February, so we had no idea at that point. But yeah.
Yeah, that was like, it took such a long lead in to get that gig sorted, because we're quite a big band, the 7 of us. That's like 7 diaries to clear, trying to find the right times when everyone can do it. So that was the initial step, like, let's find a 2-week window where everybody's free. And I think we had to wait about 10 months before that could happen. So there was a really long lead in for us to organize the tour. And then, because we've been going for 3-4 years, something like that, we've sort of had contact with lots of different promoters and venues that we haven't necessarily, sort of like I was saying before, we haven't necessarily been able to take up their offers at the time. So that was where having a tour was like this really wonderful opportunity to try and curate something and pick up on all those networks that we'd not been able to. I suppose, yeah, another thing that absolutely made it possible, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without, is some funding that we secured from Jazz North, which was just invaluable. And it's a funding scheme that you apply for, and they pay some of the fee to whoever's putting on the gig. So it kind of supplements it and means that you can get some sort of decent money for going and playing in further afield places. So that really helped with the tour as well, because we had a few of those gigs that sort of paid a bit more, and then we could do the really a tenner each gigs that didn't make so much money. And yeah, it took months, loads. We had like so many options. Like, I think we were trying for like maybe 20 dates altogether, and then so many of them fall through, and some of them even fell through like really close to the tour date, like just people who just forgot that the double books a venue and stuff.
Oh yeah,
spent months trying to make things happen.
It was a week before, just like, really sorry, we've double booked. We'll try and arrange something for the future. And this is in Liverpool, and we're like, oh, okay. So it's just a lot of, I don't know, just a lot of work.
When something like that happens, like, is that something where you sort of try and get some form of compensation, or do you just have to like deal with it?
Well, you could write it into a contract, I suppose, but I think it was like our first tour, so we're kind of putting our feelers out, being very polite, and yeah, I think if I was going to do it again, I would definitely put as much stuff in writing as possible beforehand. Another thing that we did for the gigs that in cities that we've never been in before is try and find a place to stay. Like, that is a big thing. It's just like, as part of the gig, can we find either a couch or can someone put us up. So that was a new thing, definitely with booking a tour. It was like, right, we need food and we need a place to sleep. So it was, yeah. Also, I've noticed some of the questions. Someone's asking, why the masks? Why would you recommend bands to have a gimmick? I don't recommend any bands to have gimmicks, but I think we kind of thought about the performance as a separate thing as well as to the music. So we tried to put as much thought in as that as the music. So, and we try and like portray this animal. I don't know what's the word, like it's some sort of ritualistic animal spirit on stage. That was like my first thought, without masks. And then suddenly I think I got this panda mask, which is quite scary.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just try and I suppose we just want to become the animals, like our masks, whichever animal we have, we try and basically become them on stage and get into that like mindset. Plus we all love animals. I probably prefer animals than humans, but I love humans, but I'm just saying, yeah.
Also, it came about because we got sorry John, the local puppet theatre was getting rid of this absolutely massive like rabbit head. They used to use it on a play and it was scaring all the children, so they were throwing it out. So that started to come to all of our gigs and people would dress up in it, and so it kind of just became this thing that we ended up having, that was just almost as much a part of the band as the music.
So, you're going, John.
Well, there's something really nice in that. Sorry, there's something really nice in that. I think where it is really good having the masks is it sort of helps us step out of being ourselves a little bit. And I think something about the music that we make really benefits from that, because it kind of gets rid of a little bit of that self-consciousness of being like, oh, we have to be one thing or another, and it makes it into something where we can sort of give ourselves over a little bit easier. But I wouldn't say that's not just the masks, it's also the space that Ponyland is in, and it's also and having something that then also goes out into the audience as part of that is also like another breakdown of a sort of traditional gig setup. And it means that we get to bring the audience in with us a little bit more, and we get to go with them a little bit more, and that's really nice. But I mean, that kind of device could be anything. You know, you could be the sort of band who decide that what you want to do is like stand really still but play really intensely, or you could be the kind of band who leap around and have a really good time, or you could be the kind of band who just have, like, you know, a bunch of really good songs and you play them really, really sort of earnestly and straight, and that's the thing that does the job for you. You know, there's any number of ways that you can get at something creative with it. I think that's, rather than looking at it as a gimmick, I think if you look at it as a cool creative decision that you have the option of making, then, you know, you're making a kind of statement about what the whole thing is beyond just the music. Because I think it's easy to sometimes get stuck thinking just about what you can do musically as a band, but then there's loads of other things you can do too, even if it's just in terms of, you know, are we the kind of band who are going to be really approachable to people who want to come and talk to us and be really smiley and friendly after gigs? Or are we the kind of band who want to like put up an image of being like really kind of tough and intense because that's the music we make, or whatever it might be? You know, those are all kind of creative decisions as well as you know, personal decisions.
So you'd say it was important to have a sort of consistency to whatever sort of image you're giving off for your band. You know, you create a persona, so to say, for your band, and
it can really help, and especially if we're talking about sort of getting gigs as well and sort of being present in a scene. I think if you can put intention behind how you present yourself, then I think that's really helpful for that too. And it doesn't have to be a kind of cynical marketing kind of decision. It can just be something that's very, true about what you want to present. I think you can bridge that gap if you're thinking about it creatively. I think you can really do that. And that's one of the things that I really admire about how Ponyland's been run, certainly since the album came out, and maybe a bit before then. I think I couldn't really tell you the timeline exactly, but I think there's a point where I definitely think of there being a point where Ponyland turned into the Ponyland that we now have. Hey, Faye's returned.
Hey,
Thanks.
I am so sorry. My internet switched itself off.
Oh,
and
no.
that sounds like a lie, but it really did. And I didn't realize that's what had happened. So I spent 5 minutes just restarting my laptop, and then I went downstairs. Anyway, this is so boring, but my internet takes a while to switch back on. So
Okay.
here we are.
We're gonna take that as a really good segue, talking about the band, and then having Faye back to listen to our next short clip. And this song is called "Moss Will Cover Everything." So if we're ready to play that one, we'll listen to it now. Cool. We got a little view of what it's like to be at one of your gigs. I've been. I know it's epic. So, do you want to just maybe say a little bit about that track, anyone? Whoever's speaking, you're muted.
Thank you.
It's my favorite song, I think. I absolutely love it. It's basically, for me, all about climate change and how capitalism is exacerbating climate change, and it's a massive statement against that. So I love it.
Cool.
I love getting punky and screaming. It's really good.
Speaking about influences of your music, where do they come from? Do your fans influence your music at all, or is it something that's quite is it a personal sort of thing that happens?
Influence, there's so many. It's there's so many influences for me. Initially it was mystic revelation of the Rastafari. That was very much in that sort of vein with yeah, it was kind of chill, and now it's kind of turned into more Death Grips. So it's I don't know, combining that sort of maybe electronic music such as Prodigy with something like Sun Ra, and thinking about how to combine that sort of stuff and try and make it as creative and as fun as possible. I don't know, but yeah, I get inspired from the gigs that I've seen. Definitely the top few gigs, Sun Ra's orchestra was amazing, mind-blowing, and yeah, Death Grips was one of the it was just incredible. And then obviously Lightning Bolt is the new thing that is just blown my mind. And then all the other influences that everyone else is into, so much diverse music in the band, free jazz, just loads of stuff just comes to the table, and at any moment as well. Although it's kind of composed music, it can go in different directions, and I think you do hear lots of different influences. Go on, Mark.
Yeah, in terms of the audience kind of influencing the sound, I think it's something that's really hard to avoid. And as a musician personally to myself, in and out of Ponyland, it's something that I actually struggle with is trying to not think of is trying to not think of the audience, because it's so easy to try and write music that you think people want to hear or such. And I think there's it's much more rewarding to have a live influence from the audience. So rather than, writing a song thinking, we've been writing these tunes for a couple of years, they seem to like it, let's keep doing it. So just write whatever you want, whatever you feels right in that moment, whatever's happening in your life, write for that moment. And then when you're performing, however the audience is reacting, you can take from them there. And that's when you can get the audience influence and be like, oh, this audience really likes the heavy drops or such. And you can, play a bit more into those sections. Or if they really like the dancey sections, it's like, great, we're going to scar this up, really get them bouncing. So yeah,
That's really
influencing is from the audiences. It's
Yeah.
a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, that's like really good advice. I think a lot of people probably don't maybe recognize how much an audience can influence a band in that moment as well. So, like, how do you guys communicate while you're on stage?
Well,
Okay,
oh,
Joe.
no.
Oh, no, we're going to Faye. All right, Faye then.
Oh, we're going, okay. Well, I was actually just going to say, I'm usually stood next to Geordie, so he will just say what to do. He'll just be like, solo now, or he'll be like, next. Sometimes Geordie will just like point, and I don't, I feel maybe there's just something that's developed like from ages of playing, but I definitely feel sometimes we all make signals that don't actually say anything. But it's like we all know what to do. So it's like I think it's just like signaling that we're going on to the next bit. Or actually, yeah, Geordie does quite a lot of like directing it live as well. Like changes it quite a lot. So like Mark was saying, if people are really enjoying one bit, then we'll stretch that bit out, and Geordie will like signal sometimes to get really quiet to so that we can like bring it back up again. And so I think yeah, I mean I'm lucky that I stand like close to Geordie so I can see what's going on. I don't know what it's like for everybody else. So.
Cool. And John.
I think I stand on the other side of the stage from Jodie most of the time. So for me, it's actually a lot about making sure that I look out for those communications. I think that's something that as a musician, whether or not I'm consciously doing it, or whether or not it's something that I've just kind of developed a kind of sense for over years of playing gigs in lots of different situations, which is sometimes really challenging. If you're playing in a noisy environment, which we almost always are because we are a noisy environment, or if you're playing somewhere where you can't hear very well on stage from sound systems, or you're playing somewhere where the audience are quite loud and maybe they're not paying full attention to what you're doing, or whatever it might be, that can be a kind of barrier to you sort of hearing things very accurately. I think you just kind of you get used to bringing yourself to a point where you can pay attention to the people you're on stage with. And I think that's the really crucial thing, is just being really aware and listening closely and watching closely to make sure that you know where you are. And then if you're comfortable in the band, if you trust the people that you're playing with, and you have a kind of, you trust yourself with the material and you trust the people who are there with you playing it, then I don't think you can go wrong. I think Ponyland's a great example of a band that just seems to work because everyone who's there is very tuned in to the moment that we're making. And even when things get really strange and out there and like they might fall to pieces, and sometimes do fall to pieces, I think it's still like it just fits. It's just right for what's going on right then, because we're all there for it,
Cool. Yeah. Joe, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just gonna say I end up like phasing out and then just realize I've been staring at Geordie for like 20 minutes, waiting for him to nod.
No.
But then also like because the drums are at the front, I always selfishly try and be the drummer that hasn't got their back to you. But then you kind of after a while you kind of if you're the drummer that's looking at you, you nod to the other drummer when like the next bit's gonna happen.
And how does that work between the two drummers? Yeah, go on, Mark.
So sometimes it's quite ritualistic to bring that up again when because we face each other. You know, I could be staring right into Joe's eyes, or Adam or Dave, and you know, just drumming away, staring at them, and then I might get just a little nod or something, and it's like, okay, great, let's move on. But I think my favorite one is quite regularly, because Geordie will be behind me. I can't see him put his hand up. Might not have got a signal from Joe, so I'll just hear from behind me. Is that right? Okay, we're moving on.
That's a cool sort of cue.
Yeah, it's really fun, like screaming as loud as you possibly can at two drummers. It's so much fun. Like, I do it in the best intent, and I'm really happy all the time with these guys, but I just love screaming at them. It's like, and it means nothing. Like, it might mean I'm happy. It might mean that we should move to the next section. There's no like actual meaning behind the scream apart from it's something's happening. So yeah.
I think sometimes you're having like, sometimes you're trying to tell us stuff, and sometimes I'm like, oh no, I think he's just enjoying this.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it took a little while, because when we first started doing some of these tunes, and Geordie started like wearing the ape mask that like really covers your face, like fully covers your face. There was a while when everything was just nods, and everything was just nods. Like whether or not that was no, don't change this bit, was just like this ape face just moving in an indiscriminate way. And I was just, I'm not getting any direct messaging here, so I guess we're changing. Oh no, we're not. Never mind, we've changed now. But again, like that just sort of feels right, you know. I think with the way that the band works, it's definitely turned into something a lot more kind of clear now. Though, like there's a lot of hand signaling and there's a lot of kind of pointing. And again, like I think across the back line of the band as well, because the drummer's set up in front of the back line, which is kind of rare.
Oh no. Possibly lost John as well. Okay, well, he'll come back to us in a minute. I'm going to sort of like move us into a slightly different direction of questioning about funding of the band, because I think a lot of people will be like, how do you keep that going, you know?
So I often resume the position of band manager financial, Frankie. It's been quite difficult because we're a big band. There's 7 of us. Everyone's a professional musician, so it's it's our livelihoods. I am the least professional musician because I have another job. But it's it has to pay, it has to sustain. So you've always been really quite firm, always made sure that we do get paid. The main thing that has been such a massive help was, like I said before, the BlueJam, not BlueJam. Jazz North funding.
BlueJam's been a massive help as well. Gilly's been amazing all the way through. I don't know, growing up, playing music in Penrith. Yeah,
pre-band, during band, all of it, post-band. This is happening, so it's still supporting us.
I think Faye was.
Yeah, you got something, Faye.
Oh, sorry, I was a tiny bit tuned out there because I was just thinking about how nice Jilly is. Did you say that I have some advice on this? Yeah, because I totally do. Yeah, okay, fine. Well, I think like there are quite a lot of things that you can apply for to try and get help, and I think they can seem like really alien if you've never done them before, but there are a lot of people who are paid in those organizations to offer you help. So like Help Musicians UK are really good. They've got different things available, and so like Jazz North, who we were on the Northern Line with, they're really good, and I think they would probably be up for offering advice as well, because I think like getting somebody to talk through with you like how to fill out an application form is really good. And then also there's like there's sort of like different schemes that you can apply to be on as a musician, and I think there's a few schemes that are aimed at people in like the north and people that don't like live in London basically. So I think that sometimes it can be to your advantage if you scout those things out. But there's a few places. So Sound and Music are really helpful. If you go on their website, they've got a list of opportunities. Brighter Sound can be good as well. They have different schemes. So yeah, and I've said Jazz North, Help Musicians UK. There's PRS Foundation, who I think like they could be good. They have lots of different things. I'm trying to think. Musicians Union might do. I don't know if you have to be in them to get help from them, but basically, yeah, I think just talking to people. Oh, the Arts Council. Yeah, the Arts Council will be. Their application forms are really difficult, but at least they will have someone to talk to you, and they might just support you through finding stuff. It is really hard, but I think the more people that don't usually apply for things, the better, because I think they probably need more people that wouldn't usually put themselves forward for it.
So I guess you would say like just make sure you have a go. You
Yeah.
know, don't be sort of like put off by the difficult forms, or because sometimes
No.
they're quite simple, but yeah, definitely they can.
Yeah.
It's good to search out the
I
help.
was going to say, if you don't like succeed in getting funding from anyone, because it is quite difficult sometimes, and don't give in. Like, there's so many bands that don't get funding from things, and they can still make it work. And just practice together, play together, do as many gigs as possible, try and get paid so you can keep everyone kind of afloat. A lot of people aren't like professional musicians, so they've got to hold down a full-time job, so it's difficult booking tours. You've got to just book it maybe a year in advance, try and get everyone off, and just go for it and just have fun. Essentially.
And also, like, if you do have another job alongside music, don't think that makes you less legit when you're applying for things, because it doesn't. It's just it doesn't mean anything really. So just yeah, I think just believing in what you're doing and knowing that it is worthy of public funding, because it is. I think it's a bit of a thing that people can be like, oh, I can't receive funding for what I do, but like, no, you can. So and even if you don't get it, like Jodie said, like, eventually at some point you will get something if you keep going for it. So
Yeah, and John, you've got something.
I want to second all of that, and I'll also say that if you're in a situation where you don't have a lot of money behind you, then reach out and ask for favors. Ask for friends to do things for you if they can. If you know creative people, if you know people who draw, if you know people who are artistic, who can help you make posters or flyers or can help you make artwork, there's certainly in the sort of first stages of a band's life, I think really pulling on the kind of creative and friendly connections that you've got can be as valuable as a chunk of money behind you to get started, and like recording as well. Like if you the album that we put out was nearly entirely recorded on a shoestring budget. We didn't go into a professional studio to do it. It was all done sort of with our own gear that we had access to, and space that we were able to get hold of through that same sort of string pulling and favor asking. So, think sideways as well. If you can get stuff happening without an awful lot behind you, then you've got something to show when you come forward to say, we want support for this thing that we're doing, and look, here's what we did without. So imagine how good it could be with. I think that can be useful in both of those aspects.
Yeah, that actually leads me really nicely onto another question. But before I ask it, I'm just going to say we've got about another 15 minutes. So anyone watching who has some questions, please do put them into the Mixcloud chat, and we will see them. There's a bit of a delay, but we will see it. But yeah, we've got a few more questions on our end anyway. Talking about recording, can you give us a bit more of a deeper insight into that, and also about how you go about releasing your music? who's gonna go?
Shall I can talk a bit about the recording process for the album, certainly. So for Mora Mora, which is the album that we put out last year, the year before, last year? The year before, yeah. Okay.
Year before, I think.
Yeah. That was
Later that year. Yeah.
Yeah. So so the basic band tracks for that were recorded in a rehearsal room that I was sharing with a friend of mine in Gateshead up here. And I think like I had an interface, I had a laptop that wasn't particularly powerful with a program called Reaper on it, which is a cheap digital audio workstation program, like Pro Tools or Logic, but a lot cheaper and just as fully featured. Get Reaper. If I have any piece of advice for someone who wants to get into making music on their own, spend 50 quid on Reaper. It's the best program that you can buy for 50 quid that is as good as any number of 200 to 500 quid audio programs I've encountered. Anyway, so just using Reaper and an 8-input audio interface, we recorded bass, guitar, and 2 drum kits with 8 inputs in this room. And Jody came to me before we did this, and he said, "I think we should record in your space." And I said, "All right, I don't know if it'll work." And Jody was like, I think it might. And okay, well, how about we do a day of demoing? Like we'll record a song and see how it goes. And Jody went, "Yeah, okay." And we showed up, 2 drummers, me, Jody. I think Frankie was there as well. I think one of the horn players was around just to sort of hang around. And we played one song and we were like, "Oh yeah, it's okay." And Jody went, "Great, let's do the rest," and just made us do them all there that day.
You got to strike when the iron's hot. And
I mean,
he
was totally right. He was totally right. It was totally the right thing to do because it came out sounding really raw and really perfect for that music, you know.
I'd like to add, John was saying about Reaper. I didn't know anything about mixing or anything like that. So I got presented.
I didn't know anything about recording when we did this, really.
Yeah, so I got presented with all these stems from John. And I quickly got some digital audio software. It was called Studio One. It cost 150 quid, came with a free microphone and headphones. And yeah, I just tried to figure it out from YouTube, and I did as much as possible. I think I stayed in the studio in this room for maybe 4 months, and Joe kept on giving me vitamin D tablets, kept on popping in with vitamin D tablets and doing like overdubs of drums and stuff like that. And it was great. And we just did it with one microphone, like the add-ons and stuff like that. And I didn't know nothing about mixing. And yeah, I just asked people, and yeah, it got somewhere with an unpolished thing that I was really proud of. So
yeah, because I suppose the first thing we ever made, ever recorded, the original EP, we like sprung for a studio. We got it done in a professional studio in Newcastle. Spent hundreds and hundreds, and it was just the EP, so it wasn't that many songs, and just the expectation was so high, and you had such a clear idea about what you wanted, and then it just didn't hit the mark. It wasn't what it sounded kind of too clean and kind of too produced, and so then it was like, right, let's just strip it completely back. You bought the 150 quid software and just learned it all yourself, and that actually was the best thing. You learned so much in the process and had so much more creative control, and yeah, it worked out a lot better.
Yeah, I'd recommend getting your own software and just having a bash at it, basically.
Yeah, so like being able to actually understand what's going on a bit more than, well, also assuming that you can do a good enough job for it, especially if you're the one with the vision, rather than giving somebody else who's maybe going to try and do something that you're not necessarily wanting. That
can go a long way. And again, ask people for help. You know, if you know people who make music or you know people who record. I have a very good friend who's a composer for sort of radio and TV. And anytime I'm not sure about something, I could just bounce an MP3 out and email it to him and say, "Am I looking in the right direction here?" And he knows so much about this stuff that he can come straight back and say, oh no, you want to look at this, you want to look at this, you want to look at this, but I think you're looking in the right direction. And, you know, we're good friends, so it helps that we can do that. But, you know, the worst that he could do is say, I'm sorry, I'm busy right now and I can't help you. And which is fine, because he's a professional and he's working, and I'm a professional and I'm working. I think just asking people for advice and feedback and help can teach you so much, and can seem intimidating, but really you can just go for it. And the worst that you get is like no response, you know.
Yeah.
Which isn't that painful in the grand scheme of things.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a lot about asking, and you know, people love to give help actually more than some people realize. People want to help, you know. What about, so like as a band, what are some just like cool experiences that you've had?
Oh, well, my favourite was when we went to Holland last year. That was amazing. And I still have a picture in my phone because they had like a boat that was called like Pannekuchen or something. And it just said pancake on the side of it. I think it means pancake. Anyway, so it's just a pancake boat. And, but that is actually totally irrelevant to the Ponyland. Well, it was part of the Ponyland experience, but the actual gig as well was amazing. And, yeah, it was just so lovely, like to be kind of away with a group of people that you really can have fun with, and you really trust, and also the music was really good. And it's like, I feel like that doesn't always happen in bands or like in situations when you go away. Like sometimes not everyone like clicks or is on the same page, but it's just a really nice band where everyone is quite understanding of each other. So and it was just amazing to we got like put up in this really fancy hotel, and yeah, the whole thing was just really fun. It was playing at this festival, so yeah, it's good.
It was like a holiday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Everything just ran really smoothly.
Yeah.
Everything just worked, which was great.
Mm.
I think we prepared for the worst, but it was everything.
Yeah, just one of the things I loved about that experience as well is that we've tried to make sure we keep our environmental footprint down to the extent that we try and car share and kind of just conscious of it, and try to just do what we can when we can. And this was our first gig abroad, and so we approached the people who booked us and said, you know, we want to get the train, it's far more sustainable, we can do it. And they said yes. So that was just another thing for me that just meant that this band was just the right sort of people, because everyone was on board with spending 2 days getting to Holland and back, and we all sat and played cards on the train for hours.
The train's really nice.
Really nice.
I think that was like the start of the holiday for us. You know, when you go to an airport, it's always kind of stressful. I don't know, like sitting on the train was just, that was it. That was the start of the holiday, and we had so much bonding time. And yeah, it just went smoothly. That was great. And some of the top things for me, I think, are doing gigs in Penrith. I just really love doing gigs in Penrith and seeing all my mates.
What are some of the venues you've gigged at in Penrith?
So Felbar is it the only gig, or you got Penrith players?
Free booze.
Sorry?
Free bar tab.
Oh yeah. So my bar tab apparently is horrendous. But Joe used to work in, or still does work in, Felbar, and there it is, just like, oh, Joe, can we do a gig in your pub? Yeah, okay. And it's always the best gigs. So if you're a local band to Penrith, yeah, hound Felbar when it's safe to, obviously.
Yeah, just to touch on that. Yeah, the Felbar. So you know how, you know, some gigs can be, you know, 20 different mics, all the drum kits mic'd up, and, you know, monitors, you can hear yourself, in-ears maybe. But we play Penrith that has next to no equipment. We have PA speakers on a table that people sit at and drink their pints on. And honestly, I think that is my favourite gig that I've ever played with Ponyland, was in Felbar with next to no equipment. And it just shows like the atmosphere and energy has so much more to do with the enjoyment of a show than, you know, having all this fancy equipment that, you know, a lot of people look up to and think like, oh, one day I want to do a gig when I've got in-ears. It's like, nah, it doesn't matter. It's just about the energy and the atmosphere.
That sounds great. I'm gonna try and be at the next Fell Bar gig then. Squeeze in.
Great pub.
Yeah.
That was a really weird gig as well because, like, yeah, the sound shouldn't be good in that room. It's tiny. And Mike, who was doing the sound for us, was also hammered. But everything just worked. And there was 3 drum kits. Like, we struggled to get 2 in the time before. And then we got 3 in, and it was great. So
Mike wasn't doing any sound as well. I was just like, Mike, can you do some sound, please, tonight?
I was gonna say, I
And he
don't
was just
even
like,
remember
yeah.
there being a sound person. I
No.
was like, there was a
So-
sound person. All right.
So yeah, I mean, just ask. I think that was, yeah, it's always nice. Go on, John.
I just love how sometimes, like, we can show up to do a gig. I'll see, like, you know, I'll know that I have a Ponyland gig at the weekend, and I'll look at it and go, oh, great, cool. I have to be in wherever, Penrith, Carlisle, you know, we're doing a festival somewhere on the other side of the country or whatever it might be. Cool. And we'll get there, and we could be playing, like, we could be playing on a stage, or we could be playing, like, on a couple of boxes, or we could be playing in a wrestling ring, or we could be playing, you know, like, I think that the wrestling ring might be the weirdest, actually. That might be the strangest sort of stage setup. And we appeared, I remember Faye and I had been playing at another festival with a different band. And we knew we had a Ponyland gig, so we set off from Lancaster and drove across the Pennines. And we arrived at this other festival for this Ponyland gig, took our gear out, and Jody goes, great, we're playing in a wrestling ring in this tent. And I was like, is he kidding? And we went in. No, he wasn't kidding. It was a full-size elastic roped wrestling ring surrounded by festival goers having a great time. And it was really something. It's really something. But again, it's almost not a surprise because you go, yeah, of course.
I think
That's where this band would play.
absolutely fits. And like, so this is going to be our last question. So yeah, make the most of it. But what are your plans for the future?
I think I've got it in the back of my head that we're going to do an EP, maybe a 2 or 3 track EP with all this new stuff that I'm thinking about. It's kind of it's very much Afrobeat influence, but it's more punk as well. I don't know. It's going in the Ponyland direction as I'm seeing it, I suppose. But yeah, I want to do this EP and really push it, I suppose. And yeah, we'll see what happens from there. I just want to get gigging. I think it's very hard to be a musician in these times, to see what the future is going to be. Like, I just want to play some music, but doing that is very difficult. So, I mean, the future, yeah, I suppose just we can record, and I just want to have a rehearsal. That'd be great. Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I was just thinking maybe we could have a rehearsal in like a field, like an acoustic rehearsal, maybe. That was, anyway. That's my, yeah. I don't know. I feel the same as Geordie. Like, I don't know when gigs are coming back or anything. So, people seem to like. I know outdoor gigs are allowed. Ponyland have done quite a lot of outdoor gigs, so I think it just takes a while to get stuff up and running, really, doesn't it? So it's like, even though they're allowed, I don't think that means they're just going to start happening straight away. And I don't know, like, we still don't know how safe everything is. So there's just so many question marks all over it. I'm excited to do an EP though. Yay.
Cool. So, well, just to finish us off, do you want to just do some shout outs for those things that you want people to go and listen to, and where they can find your music, where they can find more about you all, find out more about you all?
So we've got our album. It's on vinyl. You can get a digital download and a few CDs on Bandcamp, so you can get that. And we've got some t-shirts as well, and that's all on Bandcamp. So if you search Ponyland on Bandcamp, we've got all our merch. And there's cassettes. There's an option of getting cassettes, but don't do that, because that means that I'm recording from vinyl onto cassette, and I have to listen to the vinyl and record, press play, press record, and then I have to hand make the cassettes. And I got backlogged, and I was like, I can't do it. And they were just getting slowly worse, like the hand drawn thing in the front. So yeah, don't avoid the cassettes and go for the vinyl or a t-shirt, or just support any bands at the moment that you like, because everyone's having a really tough time. But yeah, yeah, and find us on Facebook and ask us any questions as well. Send us a messenger on Facebook if you've got any questions. We're happy to help. I'm sure anyone would be in the band, so just ask away.
Cool. So to finish, I'm hoping that we'll be able to play our last song, which is called Voodoo, and we will then wave and say goodbye. So yeah, this is the last song, and it's Voodoo.